You ever find yourself in one of those moments where you swear the whole world just stops spinning you? That happened to me, right there in the middle of La Papong, one of those Manhattan restaurants where a single glass of wine probably costs more than my rent. I mean, you could feel the hush crawling up the velvet walls, forks dangling midair. Even the piano guy hit the brakes on his solo when he realized something big was about to go down. And me? I was the trembling waitress facing down a billionaire with a reputation for chewing people up and spitting them out, a man who thought he could buy the sun and never have to look up to see it shine. But let me back up a sec. Nobody sets out to be the center of a scene like that. My name's Sophia Jenkins, single mom, 28, hustling 2 jobs to keep my daughter Kiki in dance lessons and maybe little hope for a life that isn't all bills and subway delays. When I landed a spot at La Papong, tucked above an old building on 62nd, it felt like a ticket out of the grind. Fancy uniforms, customers who left tips big enough to change your week, even whispers that celebrities sometimes snuck in for a private meal. But you had to be perfect. I'd show up early, polish glasses until my fingers ached, memorize menus and wine pairings like my life depended on it because, well, it kind of did. So there I was, thinking it was just another hectic Saturday, a parade of anniversaries and Wall Street types, and the usual buzz of rumors tonight. Maybe a billionaire would show. I didn't expect to end up at table 9, but that's what happens when the regular waiter slips, champagne crashes, and suddenly all eyes turn to the new girl. I grabbed my tray, straightened my back, told myself not to sweat it. And there he was, Ethan Caldwell. You've probably read about him. Tech mogul, ruthless as they come, always traveling with an entourage and a storm cloud over his head. From the second I approached his table, it was clear he was looking for a reason to snap. Barely looked up from his phone, just muttered, "Bring the wine list, make it quick." I kept my smile in place, offered a polite suggestion, 2001 Mosel Riesling, chef's favorite, perfect for tonight's specials. He barely acknowledged me, just snapped, "Fine, but none of the cheap stuff?" You know what I mean? The kind of man who thinks manners are for people earning less than 6 figures. I did my best, fetched the wine, presented it just right still. Nothing pleased him. He ordered Wagyu steak, rare, no garnish. Sauce on the side gave the impression that if I so much as breathed wrong, he'd throw a fit. His business partner, Aaron, was polite enough, but you could tell he was used to following Ethan's lead, probably seen 100 of these meltdowns before. The kitchen was tense, the chef cursing under her breath. But when you serve people like this, the customer's always right until he isn't. When the food came, I set it down as carefully as I could, offered the usual, "Enjoy your meal," and tried to escape. But before I'd even made 2 steps, Ethan was barking "Waitress," and the volume alone froze half the room. He jabbed a finger at the steak. "This is raw." I said, "Rare, not raw." "What's wrong with you people?" I could feel the blood rushing to my cheeks, but I stayed calm, promised to fix it, took the plate back. Chef was furious, but she remade it anyway, just a bit longer. I brought out a fresh bottle of wine. New steak, set it down as politely as I could. But Ethan wasn't Donio, no. He cut into steak, nodded once, then sneered, "Should have done it right the first time." He made sure everyone in the restaurant heard, then called for the manager, started ranting about incompetent staff, about how much money he was spending to be treated like a king, about how people like me shouldn't be allowed near a place like this. And you know what? For a second, I wanted to disappear, just meld into the floor. I thought about Kiki at home, about the bills piling up, about how badly I needed this job. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was all the years of biting my tongue for rude customers. Maybe it was just that I'd had enough. I looked Ethan Caldwell right in the eye, in front of the whole restaurant, and said, voice shaking but steady, "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." Yeah, I said it. The words hung there, heavy, the whole room silent except for the thud of my heart. Ethan looked stunned. Nobody ever talked to him like that. The manager froze. Some people tried to pretend they weren't eavesdropping, but everyone was listening. Then, just as he opened his mouth to explode, a few folks started clapping. It was slow at first, but then more joined in, until it felt like a wave of quiet rebellion against a world where money means you can treat people however you want. Ethan sputtered, furious, threatened to ruin the restaurant, to ruin me. He stormed out, his partner and bodyguards scrambling after, leaving a pile of cash on the table and a silence that felt like thunder. I stood there, shaking, tears burning in my eyes, not sure if I'd just thrown away my job, not sure if I'd done something brave or stupid. The chef and manager came over, voices low and supportive, told me to take a break, reassured me they'd figure it out. I stepped outside, leaning against the brick wall in the cold, trying to breathe. One of my coworkers came out, squeezed my shoulder, told me customers were asking to thank me, that everyone in the back was rooting for me. It helped a little. I finished the shift on autopilot, every face in the dining room looking at me like I was some kind of hero or maybe a troublemaker. When the night ended, I half expected a pink slip, but instead the chef sat down beside me, told me she was proud, said maybe it was time someone stood up to people like that. The next morning, I woke to a phone vibrating nonstop, texts, missed calls, social media blowing up. Someone had recorded the whole thing, and now there were hundreds of thousands of views, hashtags, people cheering for the waitress who told off a billionaire. My stomach was in knots. What if the owner fired me? What if Ethan sued? What if my 15 seconds of viral fame turned into a lifetime of trouble? But then, when I showed up at work for an emergency meeting, the owner stood in front of the staff and said, loud and clear, that she would not tolerate abuse toward employees, that my job was safe, that the restaurant stood behind me. Even Bill Gates showed up one day, just to shake my hand, told me my courage reminded him that decency isn't for sale, no matter how deep your pockets run. The whole thing spiraled. There were interviews, offers to speak at events, and the birth of a foundation called Project Decency to protect workers like me from bullies in fancy suits. I stood up at a gala a month later, hands shaking, but managed to speak my truth. Respect shouldn't be optional. Nobody should have to choose between a paycheck and their dignity. The applause that night was real, not just for me, but for every service worker who ever had to swallow their pride for a tip. And you know what? Maybe I'm still just a single mom scraping by, but that night, with a simple sentence, I found a voice I never knew I had and maybe gave a little hope to people who thought they didn't have one. So tell me, if you've been in my shoes, would you have spoken up? Is standing up for yourself worth risking everything? Drop a comment below. Share your thoughts about respect, dignity, and what real decency means in today's world. Because, in the end, your voice matters. Sometimes it's the only thing that can change the story.